Hi guys, let's play a bit with our friend Green Lantern. Essentially, someone had a few questions about being a controller using the light powers. So this would be as good for the Green Lantern as well as the Yellow Lantern. Both powers are the same. The only difference is the color, just in case someone that doesn't quite know the difference between the two. Ideally, as a controller, what you want to do is you want to give power to your group. That's the first thing you want to do. I know that the name is misleading a bit because essentially the role is called controller, but in reality you actually share controlling duties with the tank, and more often than not you want to let the tank do the controlling. The reason behind that is that the tank is going to try to keep what is known as the aggro on him, and sometimes if you use some crowd control, you will give immunities to the enemies, and then the tank will have a hard time trying to pull the enemies towards him. So ideally, what you want to do, let's say you want to do some crowd control abilities or some actual controlling, let the tank do the controlling first, like get the aggro first, and then once the tank has the aggro, then if you want to use some crowd control, sure, go ahead. But ideally, what I do is that I'll let the tank do his crowd controlling, and I'll keep an eye out in case sometimes some mobs will escape from the tank, or even sometimes enemies will appear out of nowhere and will jump, let's say, the healer. So that's when usually I'll use my controlling abilities. I'll crowd control whatever enemies will try to jump the healer until the tank has a chance to try to get the aggro from those enemies. So let's start essentially with the power that the controller can give. There's what is known as a power over time. Essentially, you're going to use an ability that will give power every few seconds to your group. There's the Green Lantern is as the special thing that Green Lantern have three power over time. Usually powers have two power over time. The Green Lantern has three of them. There's the light claws. If you go down, you'll see like in control role, it panics and restore power to group members over time. So essentially, it does two things. It panics the target and it restores power to group members over time. That's what I was talking about when I was talking about power over time. And also it does some damage as a slashing claw, but we're not going to look into that today. And in the support role, there's the boxing gloves that also, if we look at the description, it restores power to group members over time, and also it acts as boxing gloves that can knock down enemies. And there's also the impact, which again it can stun his enemy, but also it restores power to group members over time. So as you can see, the Green Lantern has three power over time. I will say the Green Lanterns, but that applies to the Yellow Lanterns too. So let's show you what the actual power over time does. For that, I'm going to burn a bit of power. There we go. So we're going to use the impact power. And as you can see, there's this blue number that appeared. The blue number is the amount of power my Green Lantern gives back. Like essentially every 5 seconds, my Green Lantern will give power back to the whole group. And right now, my Green Lantern can give 79 powers. But once in a while, as you saw the very first time I did it, here again, we saw a critical where he actually gave more than that, than what he usually gives. So every 5 seconds, you will see what is known as a tick of power. So, which is the amount of power character gain every 5 seconds. Essentially, once you use your power over time, pretty much every players in your group that are close enough to you will get that power over time. So usually, even in a big room, pretty much everyone will get the power over time. The exception to that would be if someone is hiding behind a wall, or if someone is literally into another room. Then obviously they will not get the power over time. Essentially, anyone in your line of sight will be able to get the power over time. But there's another way also that you can give power back. It's what is known as the power dump. Essentially, the power dump for the Green Lanterns is the recharge ability. So whenever we use this ability, we give power back to the three most fatigued group member. So we restore power to the three players who need it the most. It also increases our might and precision for a short while. Like if you look to the top left corner of the screen underneath our name, there's this little green target that appeared. Essentially, that's a little buff that we get from using the recharge. So as long as we have that little target, we're going to have a bit more precision and a bit more might for a bit. But the real purpose of this ability is actually to try to give power to everyone else in the group. And also we have what is known as debuffs. There's essentially in this universe online, there's what is known as buffs. Buffs are bonuses that you give your friend, your people in your group, and there's debuffs, which are things that you will give to the enemy NPCs or even enemy players. Essentially, it's you give bonuses to your friend, and debuffs you give malices to your enemies. So I'm not sure if we have a. I don't think we have a training dummy here. We're going to go to another base where we have a training dummy to try and show that. Actually, well, let's actually go to do a mission instead. Against the training dummy, it can be a bit misleading because the training dummies give you power back. So we're going to try and test that against actual enemies. And of course, we got the ballista. I'm not going to do that one. We'll go to the bridge. The bridge will be a good place to start. So we got the bridge and the subjugator. So let's start. Why do we need to talk to her?
You're a welcome sight. Ask around, see you can use your talents.
So the bridge is right over here. Essentially, the arrow is pointing towards the subjugator. We'll do that a bit later. So essentially, if you look at the enemy, this is a Peltas campaigner. Oh, let's try this one. So if we use the debuff on her, you'll see a little red shield that appears underneath their name. That means that we've lowered their defenses. So we gave them a defense debuff. So as long as the little red shield is underneath their name, their defense is lowered. So players will do more damage to them. Well, let's start. And when we use our power over time, you can see underneath our name, there's this green little lightning bolt, which essentially means that we're gaining power back. And also the blue numbers are pretty much quite telling about that. And also you can see like a red little targeting thingy underneath the enemy's name. So the red targeting thingy is an attack debuff. So essentially, when the enemies have the red target, it just means that they're doing less damage for as long as the little red target is underneath their name. There's also a healing debuff, but the healing debuff is not very useful against most enemies. Most enemies don't heal themselves, so a healing debuff doesn't really help them. But there are a few abilities that give a healing debuff. If we look in the description, let's go look at one of those. Usually you have one defense debuff, one healing debuff, and one attack debuff on each power tree. So we should have one for assault, and we should have one for support. So let's look at the assault one first. There's a few abilities for the controller, like stuns. Controller will have various abilities that will stun. Like you can see the Spike Quake. If you see at control roll, it stuns up to 2 enemies. And you can see the Whip Trash lower the enemy defenses. So that would put a little red shield underneath the enemy's name. And let's see what else we have. Again, the ram will stun enemies. Okay, here we're going to reduce the target's damage output. Essentially, this is an ability that will put that little red target underneath their name, which will have the enemies do less damage. And the snap trap, this one reduces the ability to heal. So if we were to do that on an enemy, underneath the enemy's name, you would see a little red heart, and it would mean that the ability to heal for that enemy is lessened. There isn't that many enemies in the game that actually heal themselves, so that one debuff is not all that useful. It's only useful against a handful of enemies, so usually you try to use it just against them. I'll show you how in just a minute. So, and essentially, again, the impact is not only a power over time, it also stuns enemy. I like essentially you can see in the control roll for the boxing gloves restores power over time. So usually you'll see whenever an ability has to do with the control roll, you will see a bit of a description for that. So here the end trap reduces the target's ability to heal. Again, not that many enemies heal, but once in a while it can be useful. The light barrier essentially casts a shield that protects you. The triage is a heal over time. It allows you to heal yourself a bit. The grasping hand reduces the enemy's damage. So that's the one I was using that did put a little red target underneath the enemy's name. And the light blast reduces enemies' defense. Again, that's the one I used to put a little red shield underneath enemies' defense and enemy names. A recharge gives power back to three members of your group. Again, the hand clap stuns your target if you're in control role. And that's pretty much it for the control specific abilities. So ideally what you'll do is that you'll start with the power over time, which will put the lightning bolt underneath your name. Once in a while you'll hit recharge to give power back to your friends. And you will use the various buffs and debuffs as needed to put either the little red shield or the little red target underneath enemy names. Of course there's the shield that will protect you. And now we have our 8 enemies. But there's also another thing that I didn't mention. Essentially, with Green Lanterns, you have what is known as infinite combos. What that means is that with your Green Lantern, you can essentially combo powers into each other. Like for example, if I look at Impact, essentially you can see that if I tap melee, I can do the chainsaw ability. If I hold melee, I can use the grasping hand. And if I hold range, I can do a light blast. In order to be able to do those combos, I need to have purchased the ability. So in this case, I have Impact here. I did purchase the power grasping hand. And I did purchase the power light blast. And I also have, if you look here, you can see that if I hold range while using Light Blast, I will cast the minigun ability, which I did purchase also. And from the minigun ability, if I hold the melee, I can do the snap trap, which I've purchased right here. And from the snap trap, I can do the Light Blast. Again, I have the Light Blast. And from there, I can go into an infinite loop that will last forever. I will show you as an example. So essentially, I start with that one. So I can keep on going forever, so long as I don't get interrupted or so long as I don't mess up my combo for reasons. Sometimes when there's a bit of lag, it will throw off your timing, and it's very easy then to mess up your combo. But if there's no lag, and if there's no lag and if there's no one to interrupt you, you can go on forever. Also, uh, there's for a few game update now, they've added some advanced mechanics to the Green Lantern, and now the controller also has some of the advanced mechanics that normally only the DPS would have. So I could keep on going and going and going. Essentially, the more you keep on going with your combo, and the more your ability will do damage, and also you're supposed to get also some power back. And the way I've selected my powers, essentially I have three powers that I use that could go into combos. So if I start with my impact, I can then cure into combos. The same with light blast. And the same with here's the same with grasping hand. Also, grasping hand, what I like about this power is that it's also my pull move. So I can use it either to start a combo, or I can use it to pull an enemy towards me. And I hear something. Oh crap. But usually I would advise caution against using infinite combo, or not against, but be a bit careful. Because already there's a lot of controllers who barely give power or who don't give power at all. And sometimes you'll see controllers, or even like in the case of celestial healers, who also have a bunch of combos like that. So sometimes you'll see from them that they'll be so busy doing their combos that they forget to give power or to heal. So in the case of the Green Lanterns, ideally you don't want to be so busy doing your combo that you forget to give power to your group. So the combo thing is a nice way to do a bit extra damage, and sometimes to even get some power back if you need to. But it shouldn't distract you from doing what needs to be done, which means giving power sometimes, or sometimes debuffing your enemies. Like here, I've stopped my combo just so that I could give her a defense debuff, and now let's give her an attack debuff. So you can see the little red target underneath her name. So ideally you want to do the combos, but not to the point where it keeps you from doing your actual job, which is to give power to the group, and sometimes which means to debuff the enemies, or even sometimes to crowd control the enemies. Let's go. Get rid of her.
Tools to manipulate us. Destroy those magical devices so our people can keep clear heads in battle.
So usually what I'll do is that you start with the power over time. That's pretty much always your starting move. There's no real reason to start with anything else than your power over time. And then as needed, you'll either give power to the group, or you'll use one of your debuffs when it's needed. Usually you want to use the debuffs against the bosses, because normally against mobs, your DPS will go through the mobs so quickly that lowering the defense of the mobs doesn't really matter. Often the mobs will be dead either before your debuff is applied to them, or you'll barely apply the debuff, and then a second or two later, the enemies will be gone. So the defense debuff or even the offense debuff are really useful only against bosses. But there's exceptions to that. Once in a while, you'll have certain mobs who are freaking tough to defeat. So sometimes there are mobs that could be worthwhile to debuff. Like here, let's give a little defense debuff to our old friend. And then we can decide either to go with the infinite combo, or we could stop our combo and decide to give, let's say, an attack debuff, or even another defense debuff. And you'll see the supercharge I'm using is, essentially I'm using a supercharge for group shield. Again, you don't have to use it. That's the one I prefer to use. Essentially, this will shield me. This will shield the whole group. It will prevent damage, and it will restore power over time to everyone in the group. And there's my personal shield, which is great for sometimes picking up something if I don't want enemies to interrupt me like that. So thanks to my shield, I was able to pick up that collection. And even though the evil Amazon attacked me from behind, I was able to take the collection, no problem. Again, I can either decide to go with the infinite combo, or I can decide to stop my combo and cast one of my debuffs, like this. And you can cast multiple debuffs on an enemy. So you can have a defense debuff, an offense debuff, and a healing debuff, all on the same enemy. There's no restriction to how many you can have. Again, for certain enemies, not very useful. And some of the powers, as you saw, like the grasping hand, are pretty versatile. It serves as a pull move. It serves as a debuff. Also, it serves to start the infinite combo. So I guess we're up to the mesmerizer. Let's try to pick the one. I was about to say let's try to pick the one that's by herself. Also, the personal shield serves as a breakout ability. So as you saw, I was down on the ground, but casting my shield did bring me back up on my feet.
Do you have a sorcery?
Not with this guy. This guy is a Green Lantern. But next time I could use my sorcery character. So essentially we should report to Commander Adonia. Well, let's do the freaking ballista. I don't really like this one, but ever since Game Update 47, this mission is pretty much a pain in the butt. With the CR differential, sometimes the stupid bird will require like 2 or 3 arrows, like you saw. Oh. And sometimes you think you got them and the arrow will go right through them, or you'll miss them by an inch. But sometimes it'll do you a favor and charge right to you. I never liked that mission, but since the serial differential, I pretty much hate this mission. Let's try to get one of the slower birds. Or maybe this one with the bomb. Just two more and we'll be good to go. Nah. Let's see again. So ideally you start with the power over time, which also starts your combo. But then don't be afraid to sometimes stop your combo to start your debuffs if you need them, obviously. And if you cast an ability from a combo, it doesn't do the debuff. Like let's say I use the infinite combo to cast Light Ray, it will not cast a debuff. To get the debuff, it has to be you have to cast it as an ability. So I have to cast it from my tray, and then it does work as a debuff. But if I use it like a combo, it will not give the debuff. So you saw, in order to work as a debuff, it has to be cast from my ability tray. Well, let's look for trouble with this exemplar guard. So as you can see, the light blast from the combo doesn't give her a debuff, but from my ability tray, she does get the little red shield. So again, we start with the power over time. And then we go with either combos, or we go with the debuffs. Right, but as you saw, the mobs usually don't last long enough to make it worthwhile to cast the combos, the debuffs on them. But the fights usually with the bosses will last a bit longer, so then it does make it a bit worth it to cast the debuff.
I know the character Alan Scott, but what is his story and background?
He's the first Green Lantern, the original. He's the Green Lantern essentially that was created in the 1940s. He's the Green Lantern that was created in the 40s, and later on, when they it's about 15 years later, they created Al Jordan, and then they created the whole Green Lantern Corps. But Hal Jordan was their way to try to reinvent Alan Scott, and essentially at the time, Alan Scott was pretty much just a new incarnation of the story of, let's say, Aladdin and the magical lamp. So
Oh,
his
okay,
ring,
thanks for telling me.
oh, no problem. So his ring almost worked like a wishing lamp. But later on, it evolved. Well, let's go fight our friend Killer Croc. Also, with the Green Lantern powers, with the combo and all that, if you don't have any weapon mastery abilities purchased, you will do. I think it's like 5% extra damage. And if you use a melee weapon, you will do an extra 15% extra damage. In this case, I'm using End Blaster, so I'm essentially giving up 15% of damage. But I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend using a melee weapon unless you decide to use the range ability of the melee weapon. Personally, I'm under the belief that, short of few exceptions, you don't really want to go fight in melee with if you're not the tank. Like I remember when I started playing, essentially I had tried to play a Green Lantern at some point. And at the time, we had to use either boxing gloves or light claws to be able to cast the power of the time. Which meant that if you didn't know quite what you were doing, which is what I was at the time, I had no idea how to clip properly or even how to clip at all. So I would end up in melee whenever I would use my power over time. Which wasn't an issue. In most missions, I was doing fine despite that. And then I played a mission like Smallville. And that's where I learned that being in melee with one of the Doomsday creature was not a good idea. Against the mob, it wasn't that bad, but against the bosses, it was a big mistake. I guess we can use a new pair of boots. The boots or the back? Or the head? I guess we'll go for the head. So we got a brand new headpiece. And even a new style. let's see what's in the box. Oh well. Let's go back to our base. And essentially, I mentioned the healing debuffs previously. You may have noticed in this loadout, I did not use a healing debuff. Like essentially, I have a damage debuff which reduces enemy defenses, as you can see in the control roll, and I have a reduce enemy damage debuff, a remove damage debuff. So these are the two debuffs that I'm using with this character, this loadout. What I suggest usually to do is that either be prepared to change your loadout as needed, or what I ended up doing was I ended up making an armory simply for the debuffs. So I have what I would call my debuff armory. Or do I? Oh, I guess I forgot to add. Well, let's do it right now. Essentially, I make an armory usually just for adding the healing debuff. Well, let's go for this one. Oh, actually, let's go for this one. So now with this loadout, I have three debuffs. Sadly, in order to have that, I have to sacrifice my personal shield. It's not a big issue, but it can be a bit tricky in certain missions. So in most missions, I'll only use the defense and the attack debuff. And once in a blue moon, when I actually need the healing debuff, then I'll just switch to this armory, and I'll be able to use that. And I guess I had a different helmet. So I will have some crafting to do, but I'll do that at some other time. So I guess that's it for now, guys. I'll probably try to make a few more videos with this character. Essentially, seeing the character in action with a full group will be a bit different. I'm not sure if doing group mission would be a good idea at this time, but a bit later this week, I'll try to do a few group missions with our Alan Scott Green Lantern. We'll see. So thanks for watching, guys, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.